Welcome to the Customer Wins podcast, where business leaders discuss their secrets and techniques for helping their customers succeed and in turn grow their business.
Hi, I'm Rich Walker of the Customer Wins, where I talk to business leaders about how they help their customers win and how their focus on customer experience leads to growth. Some of my past guests have included Cody Foster of Advisors Excel and David Knock, CEO of DocuPace. Today, I'm really excited to talk to Marc Butler, an industry veteran and founder of Marc Butler Consulting. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Quick, the leader in forms automation. When the last step to earning your client's business requires filling out paperwork, don't ruin a good relationship with a bad experience. Instead, get Quick Forms to make filling out forms a great experience and the easiest part of your transaction. Visit quickforms.com to get started. All right, look, I've known Marc Butler here for most of my career at Quick, from back when he was a managing director at Pershing to the COO at Albridge and then president and COO at Science, who's also one of our business partners. Marc is a board member of several organizations, including Sinex, another one of my partners, Future Capital, and Advisor Bid. He's an active contributing writer and well-known leader, having served in the roles of president, COO, managing director, and more at the best firms in our industry. In fact, I don't think our industry would be the same without Marc's continued passion and focus on improving wealth management. So if you don't know Marc, you should. Let's get to know him more. Marc, welcome to the Customer Wins.
Rich, thanks for having me. I love your sponsor lead-in. What a great sponsor. The folks at Quick are awesome. And I think about when we met back many years ago over breakfast tacos somewhere in Southern California. And I was just enamored with everything that you wanted to do with Quick. And I'm always enamored with advisors who decide to become Fintech leaders, because I think they know the real problems that need to be solved. So thanks for the friendship and the partnership, and look forward to spending some more time together.
Yeah, thank you. Marc, real quick, before we jump into this, just in case somebody who hasn't been here and heard our episodes before, I want them to know about what we do. We're talking to business leaders like yourself about how you help customers win, how you built and delivered great customer experiences, and the challenges to growing their own companies. You have such a breadth of knowledge that you bring to this conversation. So I'm super excited to hear from you and what you've been doing. And where do we get started with this? I mean, if we go back to the beginning days, yeah, I was an advisor who came out of tech and said, I don't want to fill out paperwork ever again. So I've landed back in tech. How did you get started in this industry?
I figured out I was working at Lehman Brothers when I first started and came out of Syracuse University. And one of the things that I figured out very quickly at Lehman Brothers was that all these things were getting automated by technology. Things were just changing rapidly. Like, these systems were coming in. One day they weren't there, the next day they were there. And so I had an opportunity to join a business unit that at the time nobody had heard of. And people at Lehman Brothers thought I was absolutely crazy for joining something called PC Financial Network, which was one of the original online discount brokerages, except the difference was it was owned by Pershing. And it was this great group of people and peers that were of a similar age. And I figured out quickly that it wasn't about finance. Finance was quickly going to become about finance plus technology. And as a finance major, that was a really important realization. So I joined Pershing, PC Financial Network, which became DLJ Direct, which most people are familiar with. It eventually went public. But what Pershing said is, hey, can we take all of these great things we did in DLJ Direct and can we offer these things to our clients? And so out of that came something called Net Exchange. And we started a couple variations of Net Exchange that still live on today, NetX 360, NetX Investor. People kind of know these industry names. I was with those things very early on. And then we acquired Allbridge, and I joined the Allbridge team, and a couple of years later started leading that. And then, as you mentioned, I was with Skyant for a little bit, and in between there, I've served on a couple advisory boards and a couple of boards. And since then, I've started my own consulting practice over the last couple of months. So that's the journey that I've been on.
I don't know that I don't think I realized, or I don't think I knew actually how similar our startups were and where we came from. Because when I was in college, I was in love with financial services. And so I went to work at John Hancock for a top 75 annuity producer. I was her personal assistant. I had an office where all the interns were jealous of me because I had my own office. I did cold calls for her, did all sorts of stuff. I then went to work for a stockbroker at Kidder Peabody, which then became Payne Weber during the whole Joe Jett episode. So I worked for a top performing stockbroker and their team. I then went on to Transamerica. I worked in the 401k pension marketing group, and I evaluated all the 401ks in the industry, compared and contrasted them. And I went to Donaldson, Lufkin, Jenrette investment banking my senior year of college. And look, I wasn't an iBanker. I wished I had been, but I worked in word processing. This is how I got my typing speed to 115 words per minute. I read all the decks. I read all the deals before they came out. I understood how the banking system was working. And I had all this incredible background to fuel my finance degree at USC. And then I went to Arthur Andersen and became a technologist. And then I came back and said, I'm done with tech after several years. I'm going to become a financial advisor because I love finance. I love helping people achieve their goals. But man, when this paperwork thing came up, I said, okay, I'm going to embrace the technology side of me and go for it. And I just went down a different path.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And you'll probably
that's so interesting that you started down that and then stuck with it.
I did. And your journey, some of the names, I mean, it just goes to show how much changes this industry has seen over time. DLJ was a great firm. I remember being part of DLJ when they owned Pershing, and the stockbroker experience that you mentioned is really interesting. And one of the things, I just read this book called The House of Morgan, which I would highly recommend to anyone that appreciates the history of finance and financial services. But it basically takes the JP Morgan story from the 1800s almost to present day. But Kidder Peabody figures in that fairly prominently. And so it's a really good history book, and all these names come up in it that eventually became firms, or the players themselves became personalities in the industry. But yeah, that's a great background as well. But I think, for both of us, and I think whereas there's so many podcasts that have these names and titles, you can't quite connect with what they mean. Yours really captures the essence, I think, of what all of us want to represent in this industry, which is helping the customers win. And so I love the name that you've come up with.
And I'm reminded back in the days when I was working at these various firms, and like at Transamerica, it felt like a government organization. I was around a bunch of actuaries and accountants and whatnot. And I was like, man, this feels so stale. Like, shouldn't the tech be faster? Shouldn't we be doing more? Shouldn't you be able to open an account online? Those types of questions were coming to mind to me. And then one of my peers at one of these companies said, yeah, but finance is always technically behind. They're slow to adopt technology. And that's something that stuck with me, which sounds like it's one of the reasons that you went down the path you did is, and I'm going to point this out. I just had Judd Mackerel from Mile Marker on, and he said, customers deserve evolving technology. They deserve an evolution in the services and technology that they have available to them. I firmly believe that. And that's one of the reasons I love what I'm doing, is because I think we're bringing better solutions to market. And I think that you've been just an absolute icon in our industry to have been doing that. What do you consider to be one of your greatest accomplishments?
There's a couple things that I really am proud of. I am most recently proud of the work that we did at Science. Great team, great co-founders. Loved being there and turning a name that most people hadn't heard of before into something that the industry knows and likes. And so that was a lot of fun. My time at Allbridge, we focused a lot on data quality and sort of reigniting the platform, which had grown kind of stale. And people were not happy with the data quality, lots of complaints. I heard when I joined tons of complaints from advisors, and we sort of turned the tide on that. That was a lot of fun. And the work that I did with NetExchange and the beginning days of that, there were just a couple people involved. And today NetX 360, what I knew as NetX Pro, has over 100,000 users, and it has for a long time. And so those are a couple things that I just love. Looking back, a lot of it was getting to what we just talked about, customer winning. And whether the customer was an investor, whether the customer was an advisor or a broker dealer or an RIA, it didn't matter. It was really about, have you created something that serves an unmet need for the clients or the customer? And that, that idea of serving or solving for an unmet need in the marketplace, that idea has always gotten me excited.
How did you figure out those unmet needs? I mean, what aha moments did you have when you were building NetX? And I'm sure you guys were talking to customers a lot and learning from them. And I'm constantly surprised. I'll see somebody do something with our tech. Science is a great example. What they've done with our form viewer is amazing, because it doesn't look like our form viewer that much anymore. They've made it look so much nicer than we have ourselves. So I'm kind of curious, what are some of these aha moments you've had where you woke up and said, that's what we got to build?
It's really getting into, you have to be willing to do two things that I think some firms don't do a great job of, especially in our space. And the first one is, and I know this is going to sound simple, and there's some product management people out there that are not going to be happy when I say this, but you have to actually meet with users. There's a lot of firms in our space that serve advisors, but the product management people never actually go and meet with advisors. And that was something that struck me as kind of odd when I joined Allbridge, is that there wasn't a program to go out and we need to meet with users and see what's going on. And so when we started with NetX, there was not anything that was internet based. If people were using a workstation, it was either they were dialing up into some mainframe system, or they literally were picking up the phone and calling someone at their broker dealer to say, hey, what's the balance of Rich's account? So on one ear, they got the client, and then on the other phone, they got their broker dealer saying, hey, Rich's account, account number 123, what's his balance today? So it was looking at things like that and saying, well, wait a second, we're gonna totally transform that. They're actually going to log in to NetX Pro, and we would talk to them about, well, this is what the experience is going to be. You're not going to make that phone call anymore. You're going to save yourself literally 5 to 10 minutes in that process. So talking with users.
Isn't it so easy to forget that's how it was?
I know it seems like forever ago, but that's, you probably remember that really well, because you were one of those users. Your firm, when we launched it, was one of the initial users of NetX Pro.
Yeah. And I remember NetX Pro way back then. I also remember back at PaineWebber, the assistant or the stockbroker or myself trying to get the balance and also talking to the customer. I mean, literally 2 phones, 2 lines. I also remember taking trade tickets to the pieces of paper to the trade desk to actually execute for them. But I think people forget just how manual the world was and how trivial it is today to be able to just go in and see, oh, here's your balance, here's your positions, here's your last transaction. We just take it for granted today. But 25 years ago, we were asking, could we do that? Could it be
Right.
done on the web, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's really unreal for me to look at this transition. And I'm very fortunate because I actually have that background. I actually have all the way back to 1993 working in financial services. Even though I was super young, I have that view because I think that helps us carry forward to do better and better through our lives. So I'm curious, like, I mean, you're starting your consulting company. What are the types of problems that you want to help companies solve?
I think there's a couple things that I can help with. So just one of the challenges I think that a lot of firms have is just they need help from a leadership perspective. So the world, not just in financial services, but other industries, have moved to outsourcing in sort of fractional roles. So, you can have someone who has a lot of experience, for instance, as a chief operating officer or as a chief marketing officer, but instead of having to hire them and pay them a lot of money, you can get someone with tons and tons of experience and have them do work for you for 10 to 15 hours a week. Um, for companies that don't want to invest a lot of money into full-time equivalents, that is a great solution. And a lot of companies have discovered the value of that. So that's something that I can be very helpful with. I have a lot of areas where I can help not only wealth management firms, but also fintech firms in their evolution. And then things like just evaluating different solutions. I have a couple of instances where people are going through an evaluation process. They don't know the right questions to ask. They don't know where the minefields are. And look, when you make a technology decision as a large enterprise firm, it's not a 1-year decision. It's a 5-year decision because you're not going to go through this again in the next 5 years. And so you better make sure that you've really checked all the boxes, dotted all the I's, crossed the T's in your evaluation, and having someone with some outside perspective helps in that process. So those are a couple of things that I'm helping firms with right now. And then, naturally, just given my background, my clearing and custody background, I can help firms in those sorts of evaluations that they might be doing and weighing the pros and cons of different choices.
I want to remark on something you said, that technology decision, if it becomes part of the fabric of your organization, it's longer than a 5-year decision, more likely, because you'll start building into it and building onto it and integrating with it. And if it's not performing and you're frustrated with it, it's hard to kind of rip up the plumbing out of the cement in your foundation, right? So we believe at Quick that we should build products that are going to last for 10 or 15 years because of that nature of that problem. We face it too, right? We don't always have enough time, money, resources to go rebuild everything. We're trying to do that as frequently as we can, but up until last year, we still had customers on version 1 of our APIs after 18 years.
Wow.
And we forced everybody to move. For the first time in our career, we're like, okay, we got to get off because technology is changing, security is changing. We got to move.
Yeah, and look, you guys have done a great job in that regard. And you talk about being the fabric of someone's solution or their business, and I think Quick is a great example of something that, and even those people that were on the 1.0 version of the API, they probably haven't had to worry about it for 18 years because it's performed. You've enhanced a lot of stuff, and so you're right. But these are big decisions, and as you said, unwinding them, like, people don't always want to go through. It can be a lot of work. It's a big change management exercise. You and I were at it last week, hosted by Beacon Strategies, where we talked about the change management exercise that goes into changing a technology, implementing a new technology, making any sort of change in your organization. And that, I think for myself, I think one thing that I've learned through these years, I think for years I underestimated the impact of that change. But I have a much greater appreciation today and feel like I can talk and tell people about, the change management that's going to go on. It's not, you can't just flip the switch and think that everyone's going to be on board and that, yeah, of course, this is great new technology. People are going to adopt it right away. They might not, because they've been using something else for the last 5 years and they kind of like that. So those are all important things. And like I said, I think you guys have done a great job sort of transitioning people through those changes as your product has evolved.
I appreciate that. I like to think my product is so simple we can. Some of these big account opening systems, back office accounting and commissions, oh my gosh. So speaking of Beacon and the Innovators Roundtable that we were both at last week, and hi, Chip. One of the big topics that we all talked about was the data, getting data, putting it in data warehouses, or the new term is data lake. Do you have a lot of insight, experience, or perspective on that yourself? Is that something you've dealt with and know about?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at Allbridge, I mean, that is the business. I mean,
of course,
the
what am I
business
saying?
is really all about, I mean, people think about it in terms of the reporting, but the reporting is frankly worthless without having good quality data and complete data. So, yeah, and the question really becomes, which if we had another day, I think we would have gotten to more of this, which is, okay, you have the data now, what are you going to do with it? Because I think there's firms that have spent money and invested money into exactly what we talked about last week that they weren't thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead, which is, what are you going to do with it? What are you measuring? How are you going to let it impact your business? What are the decisions that you're going to make from the data? And all of those things are really important if you're going to spend the time, money, and resources to gather all of that data and bring it together. But I think other industries have done a great job at using data to drive decisions, or what I would call make data informed decisions. The data itself can't make the decision. A human has to make the decision, but the data can inform the decision that the human makes.
Yeah, so I saw a couple of things that I took from that conversation with everybody. Number one is it's way more expensive and hard to do than people give credit to it. They think, oh, I'll just put a data lake together. I'll just put some BI tools, business intelligence tools on it. It'll work, right? But the amount of effort that goes into bringing in the data into a format that you can actually work with it, storing it in a way that's secure but accessible. And this leads me to my second thing, which is, do you have the data? Because it's one thing to say, I've got all my customer data or I've got this transactional data, but what's the flavor of your firm? We had a firm there who focuses on tax. We had another firm that focuses on high net worth. We have another firm that focuses on lower net worth. We have another firm that focuses on insurance. Like, those are skewed numbers if that's all you have. But yet in FINRA SEC world, we can't just share our data with each other. So how do you get a real big picture? And I think some of the conversation was leading towards how do we integrate third-party data, which I guess is what Allbridge was bringing to an extent. What do you think companies should do about that?
If you don't do it yourself, then yeah, you need to leverage a third party. And I think the key to the whole thing is what you said before, which is, do you have, and every firm's going to be different. They have a different definition of what a complete set of data is and what it means. But do you really have the complete set of data? I mean, even in Allbridge, even though we had lots of data and sent data back to people, you didn't get every field that lived in Pershing. That was not part of the data model. And in some cases, firms didn't necessarily need all of that, but I think there's a lot of work up front talking about what is the data that you need, but more importantly, why you need it, what decisions you want to drive off of it, what are you going to use the data for? Business purposes, not technology purposes. And I think some firms just aren't really advanced in their thinking in that regard. I think they think of data management, enterprise data management as more of, oh, that's a technology thing, but it's not, because the technology people aren't using that data. You're using that data. So I think as an industry, there's a lot more work that can be done there. I will say this, and we did touch on this a little bit last week, that the cloud data providers have made this, you can call it a data lake, cloud storage, whatever you want to call it. Not only have they made it easier, they've made it cheaper. They have tools built on top of it that just make getting access to the data and leveraging the data for different purposes a lot easier than it ever has been.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that leads to the second part that I heard at the conference, which is we were all talking about AI. I mean, from moment one, it was AI this, AI that. And, I think that a lot of people and a customer said this to me the other day, AI is just the new sexy term. It used to be crypto, it was blockchain, it was whatever, straight through processing. It's the new sexy term. And people are like, I have to have that. So there's a lot of noise out there about what is AI, what AI is effective, et cetera. But I think it's also driving people to say, oh my gosh, that means I need to get the data, and I have to build a data warehouse, and I have to build AI-driven systems. It's way more complicated than that. It's not just a sexy term. It's a lot of work that goes into this stuff.
It is. Yeah, it is a lot of work. And, I think AI is not a new thing. There are things in our lives that have been AI driven that we just haven't really connected with being AI, but there's simple things. The recommendation engine that lives within Amazon, for instance, I mean, that's all AI driven. If you use, I was talking to someone earlier about that tool Grammarly, which helps, fix your grammar up. I mean, that is a lot of AI built into there. So some of these things have been happening. I think it's just culminating into an appreciation that there's a lot more to it than it just being like a little feature in a solution that we use, but that, AI can drive not just client or customer experience, but drive real business value.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, do you see any very distinct or specific ways that you think AI is going to change customer experience? And I don't care what experience, it could be retail, it could be what we know in financial services, it could be B2B, but are you thinking about that and seeing some very specific predictions of what AI is going to do?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think that there's things like ChatGPT, which I do think are game changing in a lot of respects. I think it gives some tools, and I've also always thought about, how do we really, the technology is really meant to empower and enable advisors, right, in firms. And so, AI is another way of doing that, and ChatGPT can do that in very significant ways. I always use the example, more and more people want to be creators. They want to be self-publishers. Well, ChatGPT in 20 seconds can write you a 500-word blog about why inflation is important for a baby boomer investor, and have it written at a second grade level that anyone can understand. And so all of a sudden, we've given a tool to advisors. They don't know it yet. But we've given a tool to advisors that allows them to be a creator and gives them a tool in their toolkit that they've never had before, because most of them aren't creators. They're not going to write a 500-word blog. And I know there's compliance aspects to reviewing that kind of stuff, but I think just the power of enabling advisors and their support staff with those kinds of things. And that's just a really simple example, but it could be very powerful.
Yeah, one of the things I kind of expect to happen is that AI will allow that blog article to be personalized to each audience member even. Kind of like when Target started sending out ads 10, 15 years ago, telling women they're pregnant before the women knew they were pregnant, right? It was predicting based on other buying habits. I could see where content creation becomes highly, highly specific to very small slices of the community or even individuals. And it just changes and morphs the whole concept of what is content creation.
Totally. Totally. Because yeah, and that's a great thought, because in the example that I gave, you could take that blog that just came up that took 20 seconds to create, and I could personalize it for you, Rich, as the advisor. I could make some small personalizations to what's written there to make it more specific to you in your financial situation. So I totally agree with that. I think that's a great point. When you think about AI in the context of Quick, what are some things that you guys are thinking about?
So I thought about a lot of things. We've been talking about AI for a very long time to help us build forms more efficiently, more effectively, with higher quality. I mean, our forms are high quality, but it's a very human intensive process. And I feel like we have enough data about building forms that we could train models to build the forms for us. There's some leaps in technology that we need. Other companies like Adobe have solved it. And we need to rebuild that infrastructure. Remember, I was talking about building things for a long time. Our forms technology behind the scenes, we invested so heavily early on. In the first 10 years, I put more money into forms technology than customer-facing technology. And that served us really, really well, but it is aging. It is creaking at the seams. And in fact, my product manager and I today, we're talking about how we're going to move that forward. And we have to have that kind of platform before we can say, okay, now let's automate tool sets or functions. We're considering other things like RPA, robotic processing automation, to even take what our current tools do and make them work faster with less human interaction. I've thought a lot about how could we improve the customer experience when it comes to filling out forms using AI. And I don't have that answer, but I do have an answer for another problem that I'm not going to talk about yet because we're a few months away from releasing it. But we are currently in development on an AI-driven product that is going to serve our forms community really, really well. Wow. And I'm super excited about it. Honestly, I can't sleep at night. I just want to see this done. We've done a proof of concept that is proven to do something that I don't think anybody else can do, frankly. And that's another really exciting thing. I don't think we'll always be in that position of being the only one capable, but I think we're going to have first mover advantage, which is why I'm not going to talk about it yet. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. Do you see yourself in your consulting world spending more time or less time with AI-driven initiatives? Is that of interest to you to focus on that?
Yeah, it is of interest. I think that there are a lot of interesting things out there. I mean, ChatGPT in particular, I see the use case I talked about before, but I see other use cases as well. I've tested the ability for it to do, sort of basic investment performance calculations and do them fast. And so I see some things that as an industry, we've invested a lot in over time that this could change the game in terms of its processing capabilities. I think there's a lot more to go. But I think, at least for now, some of the use cases I talked about, how do you put these self-publishing capabilities in the hands of advisors and their support staff? I talked with someone the other day that was talking about these letters that they send out to clients after they meet with them. And each letter the assistant spends like 20 or 25 minutes putting together this letter. And he's figured out a way using ChatGPT to create this letter in about 30 seconds. And so there's these small sort of things that this can solve for, that people can save, 20 minutes here and 20 minutes there. And all of a sudden, it adds up to some real efficiencies within someone's business.
Yeah, I took the stance in January of this year with all my employees that this year's theme is to learn how to use AI tools in your work. So every single person on my team has the notion that they should be experimenting with, trying out, and learning AI-driven technologies, third-party tools. I don't care what it is. I just bought somebody else another ChatGPT license today. Because if they can make their job better, faster, easier, I don't need them to work 40 hours a week. That's not the goal. The goal is productivity, engagement, interest in what they're doing, and serving our customers better and better. So if they can do it with less time, hallelujah, that's great. That's amazing. And now go focus on what really, really matters. Like yesterday, my director of IT reached out to a customer proactively to follow up on an issue that we've been having affecting that customer, because it was the right thing to do versus waiting to be reactive. And he's using ChatGPT to automate writing out specs for AWS infrastructure and all sorts of cool stuff. So I feel like if we can free up time of our team, they'll actually go do the things that matter to our customers and, you know, improve their lives even more.
Yeah, and I think back to what we were talking about earlier, where you had to call someone in the home office to get the balance for the account. You know, think about how transformational that was when somebody could just log into a screen and see that, didn't have to make the phone call. They saved 5 to 10 minutes. And not only could they see the balances, but they could see everything else. And so, you know, these sorts of things that have been developed in the last 30, 35, 40 years that enable advisors and make them more efficient, these are huge advances. And AI has a lot of promise in that regard. I think that there's probably going to be some aspects of it that are shiny and may not live up to its potential, but I think there are some real use cases in wealth management that we'll be seeing.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited for what you're working towards, because again, you've always had this passion about improving our industry. And for somebody to be able to bring you on their team, even if it's 5 or 10 hours a week, oh my gosh, I'm jealous. I think they're going to get so much value. So I want to ask you another question. What is one of your secrets or key lessons that you would share with other business leaders that has made you successful, that you think could help them maybe win more customers or just be more successful in what they do?
I think, you know, I've always had this notion of putting people first. And so I'm a really big believer in putting your team first, investing in your team, helping them with their own career development and showing as much interest in their career and their development as they may have in it themselves. Because I do think the key to any success in business is having people that we talk about employee engagement. Yeah, it's really important, but what about the people that you put in front of clients? You want them to be happy. You want them to be excited. You want them to serve the customer well, have the customer at least perceive that they're winning by working with this team of people. So I think one thing that I've really enjoyed doing through the years as a leader is helping to develop people and be a good leader for the team. And it really comes back to putting people first. And one of the things I learned many years ago that a lot of companies still don't do, but I love doing it. And when I introduce it to people, they get it right away, is the employee value proposition. I think if you really want to put people and your employees first, you have to have an employee value proposition that's really your promise to your employees on what you're going to do and what they should expect from you as a leader. And I think it's a powerful statement to make. The harder part is living up to it every day. And so as a leader, you have to be allocating a significant percentage of your time to your people and to people leadership. And, you know, I always would tell people a couple of years ago when I was at Allbridge, you know, I probably spent somewhere between 15 and 25% of my time on people related initiatives, whether it was helping someone with their development plan, whether it was helping with our job shadowing program or our mentoring program. Like all of those things, leaders need to take a personal interest, but it pays dividends later on. In fact, there's a study which we can share with your audience that McKinsey last week came out with, which really put some data to, hey, what is the impact with companies who have invested heavily in their people? Doesn't mean they're not a performance-driven culture, but they've had the right combination of driving good performance and putting their people first. And it's shown the performance of those companies is leaps and bounds ahead of other companies that may have a more top-down, solely performance-driven culture. So I could talk about this for a long time. I feel pretty passionately about it, but that's something that I've learned in my career and have practiced and feel, like I said, pretty strongly about.
You and me both, man. I've always said that I want to be known as a great leader and an okay manager. I just want to be good enough as a manager. I really want to excel as a leader. And a funny story in my company, when I got to a point where I could hire my first 2 developers, my DBA, after being with us for 3 months, said, "So Rich, what is your favorite part of programming?" Because I'd built all of our tech for a couple of years by now, and I built every line of source code we had. He's like, "What's your favorite part of programming?" And I looked at him deadpan. I said, "Not doing it." He's like, "What? I don't get it." He's like, "This is what you do. This is what you're good at." I'm like, "No, this was a means to an end. I'm an entrepreneur first. I want to get the product to market. I had to learn programming. I'm self-taught. I did all this. I've hired you now. Now I get to focus on helping you be better and empowering your best work and everything else." So I fully appreciate that advice, Mark. That is really, really awesome to hear that you're people first. Because honestly, when I think about the customer wins, when I think about customer experience, I think it's employee experience first. And we don't always articulate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you have employees that are not engaged, they don't feel part of it, they're not connected to the mission, like how is what I'm doing every single day connected to the vision and the mission of this company? If they don't understand that and don't feel part of that, that will come through every single time in their interaction with clients of your business. I read something else interesting last week. Fidelity's done an awesome job for a long time of having one of these great places to work, a place that people want to work. And they had a statistic in their quarterly report that said in the first quarter of this year, 8,200 people have elevated their role in some way within the company. This is a company of 65,000 people, and roughly 12.5%, 13% of the people they've gotten those people to the next level, either through a job change or through a promotion. And I think that just says a lot about, and it's just one example, but we need more examples like that in financial services.
Yeah, I have a lot of admiration for Fidelity. Whenever I've been at their offices and met with the team, when they go around the room, they all say how long they've been there. And it's usually 15 years and above. And there's the one guy's like, "I've only been here 7 years." I'm like, 7 years is a long time to be at a place. But they have absolute loyalty with their employee base because of how they treat them and reward them. Hey, as we wrap this up, I want to ask you another question. But before I do that, what is the best way for people to find you and connect with you?
Yeah, probably two good ways. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active. I love meeting new people, so please don't hesitate. You don't even just have to follow me. You can connect with me. I'll connect with people I don't know. It's okay. And then the other way, on my website, Marc R. Butler, and it's Marc with a C.com. So marcrbutler.com is another way to learn more about me and some of the things that I have going on.
Awesome. All right, here's my last question for you. Who has had the biggest impact on your leadership style and how you approach your role of leader?
Great question. And there's so many of them. Mentoring I always say mentoring is the cheapest and oldest and best way to develop people. And I've been the benefactor of lots of great mentors through the years, but there's probably 3 people that really stick out to me well. Brian Shea, who used to be the CEO of Pershing, was an amazing leader, a great teacher, a great coach, a great mentor. There was a guy who led technology in Pershing named Suresh Kumar, who was a great technical leader, just brilliant, taught us all a lot about how to drive hard at solving unmet client needs. Learned a lot from him over the years. And there was a guy that worked in Pershing named Scott Monroe, who ran the office in outside of Chicago. He's since passed, but Scott was one of the best people that I knew in terms of managing relationships effectively, had a great process, and cared, was so passionate about investing in people in the company and making them better. And he was great. We miss him.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. Well, hey, I want to say thank you to Marc Butler, founder of Marc Butler Consulting, for being on this episode of The Customer Wins. Go check out Marc's website at markr, like Richard, butler.com. And again, that's Marc with letter C. Don't forget to check out Quick at quickforms.com, where we take the work out of paperwork. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. I think we did it a little differently today, and it was really fun. And I hope you go click the like button, share this with someone, maybe subscribe to get future episodes of The Customer Wins. Marc, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being an inspiration all these years. And thank you for being such a great leader and being on today's show.
Rich, thanks for everything. Like I said at the beginning, thanks for the friendship and the partnership, and for all that you've done to lead this industry and what Quick has done. So congratulations. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Wins podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.